Hello, it's Workshop Wednesday.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
How is everybody today? I hope you're all doing well. Hey, it's Easter this weekend.
It is.
Already?
Yeah.
Yeah. Comes up fast.
Yeah, what it was, I was dropping frames before, so my connection's running a bit crap. So I had to adjust the stream settings slightly.
They've already noticed the
Nix
same
has
as
noticed Fruix. No, they just said Fruix peeking in the corner.
Hello.
What did you say, Fruix?
Hello.
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 Do you know, by the way, for those of you who didn't notice, he's in exactly the same position as he was in last week. We haven't moved him yet.
What?
It's been there all week.
Hello from the 6
Hello.
FPS desktop gang. Oh boy. So, yeah, today we're taming that beast that is Uix again. Or should I say, I'm not doing that, Ryuvi is. So what have we got planned for today, Ryuvi, with Uix?
Well, today we're going to cover a handful of interaction methods with Uix, including things like sliders, radio buttons, and quality of life things to add things like rounded borders. And if we have time, we're also going to cover how to make scrolling pages with scroll bars, and even pages where you can change the page and such.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
Well,
Good things.
Good things, eh? Good things come in small packages, that's what they say. So, you know. You are the smallest package here.
Yes.
So yeah, I am gonna leave you in Ryuvi's more than capable hands. What's that? Can't wait for us to get the ability to get world filters and world history. Ah, that'll be cool. So yeah, you'll be in Ryuvi's hands now, so we'll let Ryuvi go off and go do Ryuvi things.
Alrighty.
Go on then.
Okay.
Oh, you went off that way for a change.
Yeah. So, we're going to start today with what we made last time, which was back here, and it was this little control panel. I'm actually going to take our previous control panel and bring it out into the middle of the room so that we can work with it a little bit better. So as a small recap of what we did last time, for those who might have missed it, we made this, which is a basic control panel with a couple of buttons on it that allow us to toggle that back plane behind the back desk, as well as toggling the doors.
And now for my next trick.
He's gone. So I'm going to select this panel and open it so we can take a look. Basically, we covered adding images, layouts, including vertical layouts, and the likes, and briefly on horizontal layouts, and buttons, which we are going to be using all of these today again, including a lot of extra components to do things that we'd like. First thing I want to do is make this canvas taller, because right now it's a little bit too short for what I think we want. I'm going to go to our canvas. You'll notice our Y resolution here is 512. I'm just going to increase this to 1024. Now it's nice and tall. Now, the first thing that I think would be nice in this control panel would be some rounded edges. How do you add rounded edges or some kind of different edge to a panel or an image aside from just square? And someone who's very good at telling that would be Aegis.
9 slicing.
Dealing with 9 slicing.
So, essentially what 9 slicing is, well, kind of self-explanatory. Have like a box or rectangle of some sort, and you cut it into 9 slices here, like a tic-tac-toe board. For example, if you have like rounded edges, you take like these edges of an image, and you make sure that they're rounded, or maybe it's like an angular edge, or like an inverted edge, and so on and so forth. And it takes it and kind of stretches these parts that are the size to fit the UI windows, and keeps the corners the same size. So, it's actually kind of more easy to see how it works once we apply it. So, for example, cut it into thirds instead of... There we go. So you can see all the different parts here, where it'll have like the edges of the border and like the centers just filled in. And different shapes do different things, depending on like what kind of UI you want to use. So in order to apply this, you have to find the parts of the UI that you want to add those edges that have a background or an image. They're actually, no, not an image. Like each panel has a color, has a background, and you got the canvas, you got the image here. What's it under? It's, well. Oh, well, there we go.
It's a little bit too rounded, but yeah.
Yeah, let's find a better one this time. So what I did was I found the material that background has and applied it to it. So one thing I do have in supply is if you go under Uix Essentials, Assets, Textures, Sprites, and Images, you'll see a category here called Uix 9-Slice Profiles. Now you see a wide variety of them, and I'm thinking of adding more too. I made them all in Blender using just shapes and cuts to get a whole bunch of different variety of shapes. Now this is one that we're going to need for a 9-slice.
Now, one component that is used for 9-slicing, one thing you'll notice, by the way, is Sprite. That can be used. That can be used for either adding an image to a specific panel, or using the with some extra additions we have under the Sprite Provider component, you can turn it into 9-slicing, which that is found under Assets, and it is the sprite provider. Taking that sprite provider and putting under the sprite.
Oh, now it's evenly distributed.
Mm-hmm. The sprite retains its proportion regardless of the panel size by default. Now, this is good for images, but if you would like to provide it as 9 slicing, there is a border option under the sprite provider itself. Usually what I do for that, I don't, and you might do it differently, Aegis, but the border I set, if you set all of those numbers to 0.5, you have 9 slicing. You missed one.
Oh.
There we go. Look at that, rounded edges. Now, similarly, on the sprite provider, we have a scale component that changes the scale of said borders. And this applies for any kind of 9 slicing image, which you provided a bunch over there that folks can use.
Actually, let me spawn out a few.
Yeah, let's see what some of those look like while we're here.
Even some crazy shapes. How about that? There we go. Let me just nab all these. Bring them in. And depending on what kind of 9 slice material, you can have a whole bunch of different borders. And if it's transparent in the middle, you can even have like a little ring on top of like a background.
That's quite interesting.
Around it.
You can totally get very creative with how you want your panels to look. In this case, though, in this case, though, I think adding a simple rounded border in this case is good. So, okay, we have rounded edges, and I think the next thing we can tackle is something that would be nice to add to the world, which is, technically it's an example of radio buttons, but we can use it to toggle whether this place is day or night. So, to do that, we can go under our canvas here, and we have a vertical layout already here, which contains our 2 buttons. What we want to do is add another item under here, and I want these radio buttons, which a radio button, by the way, is you have a list of options. If you click one button, that one is active. If you click another button, that other one is active, but you can only have one of these buttons active at a time. Great for choosing different options available to you. And I want them to be horizontally laid out. So I'm going to add a horizontal layout, which is located under Uix layout, horizontal layout. I'm going to leave all these numbers at 0 because I want all the buttons to be nice and neat together, except for spacing. I'm going to give that a value of 10. I actually already have a question from KDR. So it acts as a bool? Sort of. It allows you to switch between any number of values that you like, and I'll show in a moment. Now, before I get to the actual radio buttons themselves, I'm going to add the value that we're going to be changing based on these buttons. In this case, I want an integer value so that we can control a multitude of things. And instead of just using a value field of type int, so it's just the integer value, we can save ourselves a couple of components by adding a relations value multidriver of type int instead. This gives us an integer value that we can manipulate, but it also allows us to drive other things with this value as well. I'll leave one here for now. So I'm going to save myself some time and take a button that we've already made here and duplicate it. and put it under our horizontal layout. Now, this button we can change a little bit. We don't... Well, let's keep the audio clip player. We don't need a checkbox. Instead, what we want is we're going to use another component which allows you to change the color of a button based on a state, which was hinted at last time, which is underneath Common UI, Drivers, Value Option Description Driver. In this case, we want type int. Now, what this component allows you to do is based on a value that you provide, it allows you to change all of the aspects of a button, including its text and color, all in one place. Our value that we're wanting to check is this one here, which we placed under the horizontal layout. Where'd the component go? There it is. Put that under value. Our label is under the button text here, which is our content. And the color is our button's base color. You can see it's completely invisible because these values are 0. So let's see here. Let's have our reference value color be kind of a red so that we know that that value is not selected. Make sure the output is 1. Now it's red. And I'm going to add an option here, which is a reference value of 0. But you'll notice with our horizontal layout, our default integer value is 0. And we want to be able to choose a value other than 0, so we need to set our reference value here to something like -1. I'll also set our label here to, in this case, day, for both of these. And let's have our true color, or well, our selected color be green. Now, you can see right away that it's green because our value is 0. If I change this to something other than 0, it's red. Now on this button, I'm going to add a Common UI button interaction button value set of type int, so that when we press this button, we get our integer value here, and we set it to the value that we want. In this case, 0. Now, I'm going to duplicate this button, and you can see because of the horizontal liner, they are horizontally aligned. And I'm going to go here, set our reference value to 1, and make it night. And I'm going to go down to our button value set, and have the button set the value to 1 when we click it. So now, you can be day or night. And it makes sounds. Those are the panel sounds, so let's get rid of that for just a moment. You can always add it back later. Get rid of the button audio clip players there. Now we have a day and night toggle. Now you can absolutely have more buttons here, like you can have day, sunrise, sunset, and based on this setup here, using an integer value from 0, 1, 2, 3, blah blah blah, whatever you like, you can choose a specific value. And this works for more than integers, by the way, because you can have a value option description driver component of really any type you want. So this works for whatever you need. Strings, integers, floats, float threes even, doesn't matter. Going to delete that. There, now we have radio buttons, and we have a means of accessing this value from here. Now, to control the day-night, we have, I believe, we have a light, sunlight, which the sunlight has a rotation associated with it. And what I'll do is, right now, we have this rotation, which we'll use as the day rotation. And to do this, I'm going to use a couple of components. We need a transform drivers smooth value of type float. And the reason we want this is because I don't want this day-night toggle to be suddenly day, suddenly night when you swap the button. We want kind of a nice, slow transition. So I'm going to grab our target value, place it in the drive. Oh, never mind. Ooh, I'm incorrect about int. we want a... Oh, I shouldn't have deleted that. Oops. My bad. Let's get that back. We want a relations by multi-driver integer. Okay. So, what I meant to do... Oh, I have to add these back now. That our target value, and that our target value. See? I'm not even perfect. Ooh. So we have our value multi-driver of type int, and we want to control this rotation. So what we can do is we can go under utility, value multiplexer of type float q. And we want to change between two values here based on an index. We take our index and put it under the drives. Now it will drive that based on what value we have over here. Oops, I missed a drive, didn't I? Yes, I did. Unacceptable! Yes. Ah, that's what I forgot. I accidentally deleted the value, so this didn't have a value associated with it. There we go. Okay. So we already have our day value, which is the rotation that we already have, so I'm going to take these values and put them here. And now I'm going to go and get myself a tooltip, which is the light tip, because I'm going to use this to change the sun. And I'm going to go outside. Let's see. What would be a good nighttime? Let's lower it all the way down. Now the sun's below the horizon. And from here we have a new rotation value. So I'll take our rotation. Plug it in here. Now, I could just drive the rotation with this as is, but I want it to be smooth. So, we're going to do a transform drivers smooth value of type float q. Going to smooth this value with a speed of 1. Plug it into our sun's rotation. And now it changes the value. At least it should. Ah, that's why it's not changing, because... So, the reason this is working as is with just a directional light, or well, why it should work, is because... Ah! Here we go. Is because all the intensity is 1. And it's not even enabled. Because we have a procedural sky material which takes in a sunlight, and based on the rotation of that sunlight, it controls the intensity and whatnot. Now, if we have day, it's day. Go to night. It's night.
If you take the light tip and move it down underneath, it automatically turns off.
Good thing to know.
Yep, and it turns off shadows by default, so I turned those back on too.
Ah, thank you. Let's keep it as day so we have some light to work with. And now we have a neat radial toggle for a very, very basic day and night. Of course, this can be used for more things. This is why I had it be a value multi-driver, so if we want to control multiple aspects of the world, we can do it right from here. Okay, so the next thing I was thinking we could cover was sliders. Because we have an elevator over here, which allows you to move it up and down. But I think it'd be nice if we could have a control value for that elevator. Because we haven't yet to revisit the elevator, but when we do, we can totally change up how the control panel works. However, in the meantime, the control for the elevator is on the elevator itself. So if it's up, good luck getting it down. But that's why we have a control panel. I'm going to start the basis of where I want the control, the slider, and to match the verticality of the elevator, since it's up and down, I would like a vertical slider. So, to do this, we are going to go up all the way up to our background and add a horizontal layout. Horizontal, I can type horizontal layout. All right. I'm going to attach to this a Uix layout, horizontal layout. I'm going to leave the padding this 0 for now, and I'm going to have the spacing be 10 pixels. And I'm going to take our current vertical layout and put it under the horizontal layout. Now you'll see absolutely nothing changes because it's the only thing underneath the vertical layout. But I'm going to add another vertical layout for our slider. Also, just to reiterate, these slots don't have to be called what they are. I'm just calling them vertical layout, horizontal layout, etc. for sake of convenience. I'm going to attach to this a Uix layout, vertical layout. Now, I want it to be on the left. It's on the right. How do we move it onto the left? Well, the slot order in the hierarchy depends, or controls how it's aligned. In this case, it's left to right. That's why this vertical layout, which is everything that we have here, is on the left, because it's first. I want this here to be on the left. We can set our order offset to something less than the order offset of this slot. Let's try -1. Now it's swapped, because this one is now first in the list. This can be changed, however, in the horizontal layout. You can change your specifically the alignment of how things are aligned. You've got your horizontal line and vertical align, which control whether things are centered left, right, up, down, etc. Now, under our new vertical align, I'm going to add two things. I'm going to have a slider, which for the time being will just be an image. And I will also add, since we also just have an image here, I'm going to add a slider set button. Now, through here, I'm going to give these things a bit of spacing, as we can see. And I'm also going to give it some padding, so that it is not right against the edge. But you'll notice that this square edge here is over our rounded edge. So I'm going to take our master horizontal layout and give it some padding on the right and on the left. Let's do it on all sides, actually. Let's make it nice and pretty. There. Now, we have a little bit of a border around all of the sides. Now, if I were to make this a slider right now, it's really wide for a vertical slider. To change that, we can go to our vertical layout here and attach a Uix layout element. This controls how this specific element is laid out. In this case, I want it to have a width of, 150 pixels. And we want our other layout to fill in the rest of the space. So we need to give it a layout element with a flexible width of something other than -1. Great. So now this takes up most of the space, but the area where we want our slider is a fixed width of 200 pixels in this case. So I want to do the same thing for our slider, except vertically. I want our slider to take up most of the space and the button at the bottom to be, well, just a little button. So on our slider, going to add yet another layout element. We have a flexible height of 1, and we will go to our button, which is not yet a button, and give it a preferred height of what would look good. How about 100? Just a little button. Okay. So to turn the slider into a slider, first thing I'm going to do is reduce the brightness of this. This will act as our slider background. Underneath this, I'm going to add and call it bar. And I'm going to give it an image. Uix Graphics Image. And I'll leave this as white so that it has contrast from the background. Now going back to our slider background, I'm going to attach a Uix interaction slider of type float. Now, this component on its own right away doesn't do anything, and the reason we made the bar is so that we can adjust the bar's height based on the slider's value. So if we go to the bar, the value in specific that we're wanting to manipulate is this one, which is the anchor maximum. if I set this to 0.5, for example, then the bar is halfway up that panel. We set it to 0.25, it's 25% of the way up, and so on. So, I'm going to take our anchor maximum value here, grab it, and go back to our slider, and put that under the handle anchor maximum drive. Now you'll also notice that our slide direction is horizontal. We want that to be vertical. And you may wonder, well, where is it? Well, it's not visible because we need to change how the anchor offset is. In vertical case, y needs to be 0, x can be 1. Now, when I click and drag anywhere on the slider, we have a functional slider. And its value of which is here, on value. Now, this doesn't have to be just between 0 and 1. You can choose a minimum and maximum value accordingly, and you can also have it be on as integers. I set this to 10, for example, and enable integers if my controller would behave. Now it snaps to integer values within that range, from, in this case, 0 to 10. In our case, though, we want a smooth float, because we might want to set the elevator to some random position, because that's what this button will do at the end of the day, is set the elevator's position. So let's uncheck integers. We want our maximum to be 1. Whoa. And we have a slider. Now, moving on down to the button, we want this to be a button. So we will add a Uix Interaction Button. It clicks. But we don't know what it does because it has no text. So I will add some text underneath the button. If you're curious, by the way, what I just did, that star button adds a new child. I will call this text and attach a Uix Graphics text. Let's call this set elevator position. There we go. That's not what we want. So to fix that, let's fix our alignment so it's in the middle, both horizontally and vertically, and enable auto sizing for horizontal and vertical. Great. We have a little button. So to set this, if we go over and look at the elevator, going to select it. I think I selected the wrong thing. There we go. And we look at specifically the lever, which, if you remember from all these episodes ago, let me go out of no clip. The lever's position controls the elevator's height. Would you mind demonstrating? As you can see. Now, specifically with this lever, the value goes between negative 0.25 to positive 0.25. However, our control value is from 0 to 1. Well, there's a handy-dandy component that allows us to remap this value to the one that we want. So if we head back in, what we can do is on the slider set button, I will add a Common UI button interactions button value set of type float3 because we're setting a position value. In this case, the lever's position here. I'm also going to add a transform drivers linear mapper 3D. This gives us an input value of 0 or 1, or whatever our float1 source input is, and allows us to output a desired float3. In our case, we want this output to be negative 0.25 to positive 0.25. And we're going to have the set value drive there. The value that we want is the slider's value itself here. Going to go back to the button, put it in the source, and now, depending on the value of the slider, it controls this float3. And if I click, well, actually, we haven't set up a target value yet, so if I were to click the button right now, it would do nothing. We need to take our lever position, put it in the target value, and now, if we look at the elevator, and I set the slider all the way to the top. I click the button, it goes up. If I set it somewhere in the middle, it goes to that position. Now at the bottom, well, as you'd expect, it goes down to the bottom. Great. You can now set the elevator's position using a slider and a button. Now, say, you've got this slider. It's got a visual display here. You can know when it's at the top, you know when it's in the bottom, but how do you know when it's, say, right in the middle? Well, right now we don't really have a display for this. But if you've ever looked on an inspector and seen a slider on here that has a number next to it, which you can edit the number or you can edit the slider. We want something like this here as well. I'm going to close this inspector since we don't need it anymore. So we're going to be using a fancy component called the primitive member editor to achieve this effect. So I'm going to go to our slider vertical layout. I'm going to add a new child. I'm going to call it text input. I'm going to give it a background image. You'll notice it doesn't show up. That's because the slider is taking up all of the space. So we need to give it a layout element and give it a defined size. In this case, let's give it a preferred height of, I guess, the same as the button, for 100. 75. There we go. But I want this to be above the slider. Well, just like we did with the radio buttons here, the order in the inspector changes the order that it is on the panel. So I'm just going to give this an offset less than the other items we have. And now it's at the top. I'm going to change this thing's color so that it is not so bright on the eyes. And I'm also going to give it a Uix Interactions Button. We have a button. Now let's give it some text. Let's call this text. And I'll add a Uix Graphics text. Let's make it white since the background is dark. And for the time being, I'm just going to give it some numbers so we can see what it looks like. I'll enable auto scaling, make sure the text is centered. Great. So, to have this be an editable text field, because right now it's just a button with some text on it, you can't change what that text says. To do that, on the slot that has our button, we can add a Uix Interactions text field. And this gives you two components, the text field component and the text editor. You'll notice that the text here in the text editor is empty. That's because we have to choose what text we want to edit with this editor. In our case, we want to edit this text. So I'm going to take this text component itself and place that in the text field of the text editor. Now, if I just click on this, it allows me to edit the text. Great. But it doesn't change the slider value. How do we pair it with the slider? To do that, you need a special component called a primitive member editor. You can find that under the spooky uncategorized folder. And scroll up about a mile to get to primitive member editor. What this takes is we have a target, a text editor, and text drive specifically. So the target value that we want to manipulate is our slider's value here. So I'm going to take this value and put it under target. Our text editor is right here. And our text drive, which is the value that the text will be changed to associate with this value. Oops, I went to the wrong spot. Is text drive here. Now immediately it updates with this value. So if we change the slider, the value updates accordingly. And similarly, if we change the value, the slider updates accordingly, like so. Now, when you're sliding this up and down, that is a lot of decimal places. To limit this, by the way, there's a special neat formatting string you can use, which is literally just the capital letter N, seen here. And this formats the number to have 2 decimal places, always. This is what inspectors use. Great. So now, Say we wanted our elevator to be exactly in the middle, we can just set the position to 0.5, click set, and the elevator goes to the middle. Perfect. We now have a neat elevator control slider, in case we want to do it from in the building for some reason. Okay. Well, that is all for this control panel in specific, but since we have about 15 minutes left, there's one more thing that I think I can squeeze into here, so I'm going to take our control panel, place it back behind our desk here, and I'm going to disable its grabbable so that we can't accidentally move it. Great. This control panel is already starting to look more filled out. Now, onto the thing that I think would be very helpful for lots of folks is being able to scroll a vertical list of things, as well as adding a very nice feature, a scroll bar. Although I do see a question here from Seeker. What would the text formatting be for a different number of decimals besides 2 specifically? That is where I'm not entirely knowledgeable. There are other formatting options available to you. I just know capital N in specific. I believe they are the C# formatting strings, but I could be wrong. Wraith actually gave me an interesting idea. Maybe it's... let's try N.3. Nope. It's something different. Okay. Well, there are... you should be able to look up C# formatting strings, and that can give you some more information on that. Now, onto a new panel to demonstrate scrolling rects. So I'm going to make an empty object. Let's call it scroll panel. Underneath it, going to add a new slot, call it canvas. And I'm going to attach to this, just like we did on the previous panel, a canvas. Let's scale it down to a more appropriate size. And I'm going to set this thing's X pixels to 500 and the Y to 1000. Great, we have a little panel. Let's give this a background. Which is a Uix Graphics image. And you'll notice it's got that weird rendering bug. I changed the color so it's not so bright. We need to give it that special material, which as a refresher is Assets, Materials, UI, UI Unlit Material. And for this material to work properly, we need to set Z right to on, and have the offset factor be some small number, offset units about 100 or more. The reason these numbers have to be this is so that this renders more properly for folks who are in desktop mode who have this UI focused, meaning their camera is looking directly at it. We have a background. I'm going to add to this a horizontal layout. Why do I want to add a horizontal layout? Because we're going to have the panel that we want to scroll on the left and a scroll bar on the right. We're going to get to the scroll rect itself, though, first. So, we need a UIX layout, horizontal layout. Let's leave all of these numbers 0, because we don't need any spacing in this instance. And now I'm going to add a new slot, and call it scroll... oops. Scroll area. Underneath this, I'm going to add a Uix Graphics image, just to give it a background, but it's not entirely important, and you'll see why soon. Underneath the scroll area, I'm actually going to add another slot and call it scroll rect. So to have something scroll, the scrollable area needs a few components associated with it. We need a layout, vertical or horizontal layout, or grid layout, depending whichever you like. In this case, we want it to scroll vertically. I'm going to give this a spacing of 10. I'm actually going to set all of these values to a value of 10, so that the items that we have inside of the scroll rect align nicely. And while I'm here, I'm going to add an item under here, which in this case will just be some white squares, so that we can see that something is happening. We'll grab an image, and here's our massive white square. Now, if we keep force expand height checked, then it won't scale because everything will scale appropriately to the size of the panel. So we need to uncheck that, and on our items, we need to, of course, add a layout element to choose how large it is vertically. In our case, let's make them 200 pixels tall. There we go. I'm going to duplicate this a bunch of times, and you can see, well, they shrink once they get too large, but they fill up the vertical layout. Now, going back to our scroll rect, the next thing that we need is a Uix Interactions scroll rect. Now, you'll see right away this does nothing, because we also need a Uix layout content size fitter. And in this case, this allows you to choose how the content is sized to a specific rect, horizontally or vertically. In our case, we want the vertical fit to be our box's preferred size. And now you'll see the boxes are the size that we set already. However, they go off the panel. The bottom of the panel is right here. That's not good. But with that regardless, you can now just grab and scroll this. But to fix that rendering issue, that's why we created a scroll area. Because we can add, in addition with this image, we can add a Uix Graphics Mask. And with this mask now, anything underneath this, it limits to that area, so our scrolled items are limited to being on the panel. And that's how you make a scroll area. This also works horizontally because a scroll rect allows you to scroll it vertically or horizontally. We just chose vertical in this case because, well, maybe you want a vertical list of items. Now, in association with this, if you want to make a scroll bar, so say you have an absolute long list of things, like on an inspector, for example, and you want to just grab the scroll bar and scroll all the way to the bottom. Well, to do this, this is why we added a horizontal layout. I'm going to add a new slot and call it scroll bar area. I'm going to attach to it a Uix graphics image. Make it dark because it's supposed to be a background. And we don't want that wide of a scroll bar. So, how do we control the size of things in a layout? Layout elements. So I'm going to add a layout element onto our scroll area. Give it a flexible width of 1 so that it takes up most of the space. And I'm going to go to our scroll bar area and give it a layout element of a preferred width of, let's say, 50 pixels. There. That's more like it. Now, underneath this, I'm going to add a scroll bar, which will be a Uix Interactions slider of type float. We want it to be vertical, and just like before, we need to set the X anchor offset to 1 and the Y to 0. Underneath our scroll bar, let's just add bar, which will need a Uix graphics image. Now, it's not much of a scroll bar if it takes up the entire height, so we are going to take our anchor maximum, go back to our scroll bar, and plug that into the anchor maximum here. And you see we have a functional scroll, well, we have a functional bar. It's not much of a scroll bar. To have it become more like a dot that moves up and down along it, what we can do is we go to our bar, and we want this Y value here to be on the anchor minimum Y value, but we want the anchor minimum X value to still be 0. To do this, we can use a fancy component. It's under relations, swizzle drivers, and we want a float2 to float2 swizzle driver. Swizzle just means you can take the individual values of one of these and assign them to another thing separately. So if I take this as the source and this as the target, you'll see it takes the 0th item and puts it in the 0th item and the first item in the first. If I set these both to 1, it takes this value and applies it to both. If I want this value to be 0, I can just set x to something other than 0 or 1, like -1. And now it's 0. But you'll notice our bars disappeared. It still works, you just can't see it. In this case, we want the bar to have a set height, and this is where offset min and max are very handy. We want the y minimum, we want the bottom of it to go down by, say, 30 pixels, and the top to go up by 30 pixels. Now, we have a bar that goes up. You'll notice it does go off the screen. We don't want that. So under our scroll bar area, we can give this a vertical layout to give some padding. Well, vertical or horizontal, doesn't matter. And we're going to set our padding top to 30 pixels, and our padding bottom to 30 pixels to match the width of this. Now if we drag it to the top, it doesn't go outside of our panel. Now to have this scroll bar's position and the actual scroll rect's positions kind of intermingled, to do that, we just need one fancy component, which is transform drivers linear mapper 2D. We need this because we can't just take this value and drive the other one directly, because it's just a float 1. Whereas on the scroll rect, the normalized position, which is what actually controls the vertical position here, is a float 2. It has an x and a y. We only want to control the y. So, we can just map our input value here to a float 2. In our case, we want our x to always be 0, and the y to go from 0 and 1. Our source is our slider value, and our target is our normalized position on the scroll rect. Now, when I scroll the scroll rect, the bar goes the wrong way. To fix that, we can just take our source min and max and swap them. Now, when I drag this up and down, I can also drag the scroll bar, and they control each other. Very handy if you have long vertical layouts, or horizontal ones for that matter, and you want to get to the bottom very quickly. One final thing, I'm going to add a transform interactions grabbable, so that I can move this thing around, and we have a nice template that can be used. And given that we have 4 minutes left, I think that is all we can fit in for today. I'm very happy with this, actually. I discovered how to do this just today.
Cool. It's always one of those awesome things when, you know, you find out that, you know, one of those things that you've never worked on or don't know about is a thing.
Yes,
so, yeah.
So nice.
Understeel said, at least I know now that these inspector boards I clicked by mistake have lots of other pre-item functions. Yeah, the inspector's a very powerful tool.
Oh, yeah.
So, should we go head behind the desk, yeah?
Yeah. I guess in this short amount of time is a good time to ask some Uix questions, or if you... I hope I explained things well for you guys and that it made sense, and if not, then we do have a feedback form. You can always provide things there, and it will give us ideas and things to cover for future workshop episodes.
As I say, you know, we don't know what to cover without you guys really going, hey, you guys should do this. It's like, we can go deeper into Uix stuff as well in the future, if you guys want that. However, we want to reach out to you guys, because we don't want to do more than 2 parts on Uix, because we could do a whole series on Uix on its own. So...
This is just the surface.
It is. There is so much with Uix, it's insane. Well, you know, good example, the Twitch chat. I think I'm facing the opposite way. Yeah, I am. There we go. I could feel the fan blowing into me face, which means I completely turned my chair around.
Well, folks don't have questions, which I guess is great.
It's good as much as it isn't. I do like questions.
Yes, questions are good.
Oop.
Remind you, if you'd prefer to see us in person, we are open after for an hour afterwards if you'd like to come visit and say hi and talk about UIX or anything for that matter.
We're also doing an FAQ stream on Friday. I don't know if that's going to be myself or Nexlon hosting that yet. It might actually be me running this Friday stream, so we shall see. Not that I mind running the streams, because, you know, it's not a problem. You know, you can see it again. He's ended up exactly in the same position again.
It's his favorite spot. It's corner fruits.
Under steel. Once we finish the stream, we'll be opening the workshop up, and just look for Workshop Wednesday public. The world will not be open until we finish the stream.
If you're curious where to find it, you can find it under the Active Sessions tab under your World tab in your Neos dashboard.
Yep, if I do... Where are we? Render private UI. Let me go to smooth POV for me. But, yeah, if you go under Active Sessions, and you'll see Workshop Wednesday.
Wait.
They can see it.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, that'll be Workshop Wednesday public, and you'll find it in this big, huge list of worlds here. Oh, there we go. Put the camera back. Hopefully that explains that one. We are going to go over some stuff, actually. Next week's our break. Well, at least for us, it's our break. However, Nexlon might be doing a tutorial workshop on camera controls. I don't know if that's going to be done next week or not, or when it's going to be done, but Nexlon is going to do a tutorial workshop Wednesday on the stream camera. So that'll be pretty much just one of us just showing you, you know, how the camera UI works.
Good thing to learn.
Oh yeah, that in its own could be quite daunting. Yes, how to set up camera anchors, all the little settings like group detection, what the little bottom bit does. Actually, I'll tell you what, let's go back to smooth POV again. And I will render this private UI again. But yeah, we'll show you how all this works down here, what this is, what these are, what's all this, what's all this, what's this do, what are these?
So much.
Yeah, there is so much stuff on here, it's great. I can go, like, internal overview, main desk, and then I will go, whoop, and de-render my private UI again. And there we go. You could do lots of cool stuff. But yeah, we are coming up now on... Well, we have just gone over the hour, actually. So...
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for joining us all. I'm going to go find someone for you all to say hello to now and terrorise. And we will return in 2 weeks with the workshop. So thanks all for watching, and goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
What was that, Head?
Bye.
Bye. Did you say bye?
Yes.
He said bye.
Hello.
Say goodbye, Ryuvi.
No.
Get back here.
Fine.
My workshop now. Bye.